I'm going to show you how I call it talking with Stockfish. It's basically when I don't understand a position, how I can work with Stockfish to try to understand it better, to understand key points, especially when it suggests a strange move, one that I'm not familiar with or it seems weird. I don't understand it. And so how I work with Stockfish to fix that, so I can understand what the ideas are. Um, okay, so I'm going to show you a position where I was surprised by the Stockfish eval to some degree. Okay, so let's. I was looking at as an Alpin, uh, from the black side, and I was looking at this knight f6 thing. And one thing I think it's really important when you can configure Stockfish in Lichess, which I recommend, um, and you do it up here, engine settings. The key thing here is multiple lines. You can also these threads and memory, different things affect its performance and how quick or slow it is, and of course you want the most recent. I think I've got actually I can update this. Um, but the key is multiple lines because that is really going to make a difference in how much it shows you. And what it's showing you is its first, second, third, fourth, sort of ideas, and you can kind of click through these so you can see them on the board, but often that's tricky because they flip around. Like the first one becomes a second one, and these positions can kind of move very quickly and be difficult to see. So what I like to do is just to actually look, just read them in notation, uh, because now you have to be facile with notation to do that, but it's an easy way to sort of see quickly what the ideas are, what it's suggesting, what it thinks the lines are, and the ideas, and especially sort of similar moves that are coming up in these lines. Um, but I'll just going to be clearer with an example. So, okay, so here's my Alpin, here. I think the main line goes in. I'll just look at the master games. So this looks like this is the main line here, knight f3. Now what I've been doing is I've been looking at this d6 move. You can see it's a pretty high rated move from Stockfish. It's one of these top three, all of which are pretty similar. But you can see it's way down here in terms of master preference, although the performance is actually the best. So you can see black players are performing, what is it, 11% plus for black, as opposed to 6% plus here, and then only 2% with knight c6. So looking at d6, main move looks like c takes d4, although obviously there's some other moves here too. Here, and then knight c6 is the Stockfish preference, and I see no reason not to do that. And then bishop c4. Okay. And there are clearly deviations. If you're actually preparing this, you should look at all these different deviations. But the move that I was interested in, now knight b6 typically transposes to these other knight c6 lines, but the difference with playing an early d6 is you have this option of d takes e5, defending the knight on d5 with a queen, rather than moving it when it's attacked by the bishop. So here. And the main move is d takes e5, although clearly you have to look at knight takes e5 if you're preparing this. And then you can see masters in general are playing knight db4 here. Now this is about 69%. This is by far the main move. And the computer thinks that's not bad. But I was especially interested in this bishop e6 move. And you can see the computer evaluation of that is also very good. Sometimes it's first, sometimes it's second. Now, obviously, Masters is doing really well with knight db4. Maybe I should look at that, and less good with bishop e6. And it isn't the computer's first choice. But anyway, we're going to play bishop e6 because I've said, like, this seems like an interesting move. Challenging the bishop here and getting it out. I'm going to put my dark square bishop on g7, attacking this pawn. So I was like, oh, this seems interesting. All right, everybody plays castles here. Now, the position we got into here, now we're already pretty deep in. You can see them playing a secondary line, a kind of a secondary line. So there aren't a huge number of master games here, but there are 42. And 95% of the 40 of them, people play g6. And that is, in fact, a move the computer likes as well. But it also likes this knight c7 move. And knight c7 is played 2 times out of 42 by Masters, and white won both of them. And you can see, so this is the position where I was interested in knight c7. Clearly the computer thinks that knight c7 is at least okay. It's slightly preferring g6 now, but as we got deeper into the position, I saw the computer liked knight c7 more. And I kind of like the idea of knight c7 because, on g6, so let me just put this in so that's going to be the primary line later, but on g6, white plays knight g5. And the only move is apparently, this is knight c7 here. But I liked the idea of you can't take this pawn. That's really one key thing. If you take this pawn, then check. You can't block with the bishop because you hang the knight. And apparently knight d7 is just terrible. So so knight c6, and then you end up with a position like this, and this queen d4 move makes this really awkward. This with this rook because it's pinned, so you have to go here. And I can see why, even though black's up a pawn here, it's a very damaged pair of double isolated e-pawns, and the e-file is open, and black has 2 moves to get castled. I can see why Stockfish 6, this is ample compensation. So you can't really take this pawn, or at least you can, but it's not that good. So you have to just let you can't take advantage of white's playing knight g5. So you have to do something like this, and then he takes with the knight. Which is, seems like black is okay here. And so it's not that bad, but I liked the idea of, rather than playing g6 here, playing knight c7 immediately, with the idea of trading bishops, because that bishop seemed pretty good. And while no doubt it's playable, there are a bunch of lines. Like you can see, the humans generally play g6, knight g5, bishop g7, all exclusively, and then takes. So this kind of position, clearly black is okay here. Plus 0.2 is not that bad. But I just didn't like this bishop on c4 sitting there unchallenged, right? My light square bishop is gone, and this diagonal is pretty good. Yeah, this knight's pretty good too, but he can't really move because of this weak e6 pawn and the diagonal. So anyway, it wasn't huge. I was like, can I avoid this? This seems like it's playable with queen e5, or queen b6 check. But I want to see if I can play knight c7, because I would like to trade bishops. Now, what's scary is that, first of all, nobody plays this, and those that do lose. So that's not encouraging. So I want to understand this position. Why are people doing poorly here? Why does no one play this? And why does Stockfish think that it's good? Okay, so the first thing we recognize is that while white can take, and in fact it does take in one game, it's kind of there. So 2 people played this. What is this? These 2 games here. I'm not going to try and pronounce these. And so one of them took, and then played queen e2. So what's going on here? Have to play g6. Well, this kind of makes sense. I mean, these knights are pretty good, but black's king is in the center. I mean, it's going to take him 1, 2, 3 moves to get castled, and white's ready to play rook d1. It does look like there might be some issues with maybe knight d5, and where's the queen gonna go? So I can see g6. The computer likes this. I like it. You got to get out of the center fast. And then rook d1 was what the person played. That seems logical. Queen b8 makes sense. Or queen c7, although if knight d5 or b5 is coming, you don't want to just give the free tempo on the queen. So queen b8. Looks like knight c3 and bishop g7. Looks like everything's what you want. Knight d5. Okay, this is the Knight getting scary here. And that's the disadvantage of having these knights on e6 and c6 is that they don't cover any light squares. They're on light squares, which means they all cover dark squares. And so it's tempting to want to take this guy, but it looks like, why is this bad? Let's just look at this. Knight takes d5. So you can see it down there. It's like that. It's not. Queen takes. Queen b5 check. Yuck. Okay, that's the problem. So you're losing this pawn back. I guess you could try taking with the bishop. I don't think that's gonna help. Oof. Bishop h6, and now you're like never castling. Okay, so that's terrible, and this queen takes move also looks terrible because you're not going to castle and you're not going to be material up, and your rook is going to be stuck on h8 forever. So, all right, so that's bad. All right, so you don't want to take that. That makes sense. Castling is what was played here, and then queen e4 seems like, and this was actually reached twice. And black played rook e8. Well, taking is just a swap of these e-pawns, and I'd rather win this pawn on e5 if I could, so let's do that. So what's going on here? Rook d8. Well, I can see why black didn't just, when this was played before, he didn't play rook d8 here, because I just moved it to e8. And it's doing, some work defending this. He played knight c7. What happened in the game? He played knight c7, takes, h4. I mean, if you're not winning this e-pawn, I guess it's playable. It's not that bad. Black lost this position, but let me just actually look at the entire game. h5, or at least whatever's listed here. Queen a5. He's just he doesn't have any active play. I guess he's going to play queen d5 or something. h6, bishop f8. He played bishop h8 because he's fixated on this. But honestly, this guy seems pretty solid. He's not going anywhere. White can continue to support this pawn. Okay, all right. I understand why black played h8, bishop h8. I understand why the computer thinks it's lousy. Because if this pawn isn't going anywhere, this bishop on h8 is just dead forever. You're just never going to get out. Whereas on f8, you obviously can go this way, and this pawn on h6 might be more sensitive than this one on e5, frankly. So this bishop on f8 has more of a future. And this was after he played knight c7. Computer kind of liked rook d8. Why did he like rook d8? Because, so he's playing bishop e3, which might hang the pawn. I guess we're just trading. Honestly, I can see the point. Like, yeah, okay, we're trading e-pawns. That's probably good for black. Remember, black was, like, as long as this e-pawn's here, this bishop's terrible. Or not terrible, but he's got one job, which is winning this e-pawn. And if he can't do it, then he's stuck. So, okay. Remember, the way I'm doing this is I'm just looking at the lines here, at the computer, what the computer is suggesting. All right, so I get this idea why this whole line, what's going on here. So queen e2, g6, this is again, it's a computer suggestion. Here, 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 here. Most of this is pretty straightforward. It's all about this e-pawn. Can white win the e-pawn without getting ruined? And you need to get away from, you need to get the king safe first, and then you need to see if you can win this dumb thing. And white is just trying to use the additional space. Knight takes e5. It doesn't like it quite as much. It's funny. I mean, it's close, right? Like 0.1 versus 0.0. White's play here was pretty slow. So it seems like black is just kind of biding time and waiting for the opportunity to trade these e-pawns. so that his bishop isn't going to be bad. I mean, it's going to be... Black doesn't have an advantage here. Black is at best slightly worse. But it's so slight. I can see why this... In a lot of these Alpin positions, Black is kind of gets a sterile equality. That's the advantage White gets, is that Black can't really play for much of an advantage. But you can get equality. All right, so rook e8, that's an idea. Again, it's about trading easy pawns. Okay, so this is like an example of a Stockfish teaching me something, which is sort of like what the dynamic is in this position, which is that it's all about this e5 pawn. Black needs to break it down somehow. Even just trading it off is fine. Rook e8, rook e8, rook d8. It's all about choosing the time. And the nice thing is that Black has the opportunity, right? Black is the one making the decision of when to trade this off. Okay, so that's interesting. I can see why. I mean, like, people are allowing this this other line where you have a knight on d5 and double d pawns, because White is getting a lot of space here. However, White does not have the two bishops, which he does in that line with the knight on d5. Also, Black has more pressure on this e5 pawn than he did in the knight on d5. So it's a matter of choice. It's a matter of taste, clearly. All right, well, that's interesting. Okay, so this line, let me just see if there's anything else I want to look at. So this is the bishop takes e5 line. What if he plays, so queen a4 was the other move that was played here. So I can see in that line with bishop takes e5, although White won that game, it didn't seem like the opening was at fault. Maybe Black played a little bit too ambitiously, retreating his bishop to h8 and not trading off this pawn earlier. All right, so it looks like in this line you have to trade off, which makes sense. I mean, you want to do that. And then, okay, we're playing g6 as soon as humanly possible. Knight c3 is what he played, heading for this juicy d5 square, bishop g7. Rook d1, oh yeah, also defending d1, so you have to, so it gets a tempo on the queen. Then knight d4 is the move that it was played. And then knight e6, which makes sense. Knight takes e6 is not what was played. What was played was knight f3. When White won this game, played knight f3. So knight f3, what happened? Just so I can be clear. Castles, knight d5, the same idea, hitting this pawn, queen b8, same idea, hitting this thing, queen e4, same idea. In fact, we get exact transposition. And then in this position, so one guy took here, he still lost. Knight g5, knight c6. So he took, and then we got this check, king h8, bishop takes g5, queen e8, which is kind of an only move. You can see all these other moves he's doing way worse. And in fact, that is what Black did, was one of these other moves. With here, takes, yeah, this I can see why I lost this. Takes, rook, and then I don't know what it is, but it just looks like this weak pawn here, and White's dominant queen position and more active rooks and everything. I can see why White is doing better here. So instead of knight c6, the computer says queen e8 is practically forced. Although f6 might be okay. And then he's sacrificing this pawn, but on f6, bishop f4, this. He can take, but then you take, bishop c7. Okay, so there's some gymnastics here, and he's forced to take it because if rook c1 takes here, and the rook can't take back because he's getting mate out on e1. All right, so he's forced to do this, and then win the queen back, and takes, And then with rook d7, black is just in time to get a drawn rook and pawn ending. Even though you're down a pawn, you have the first move, and white has to make a move to not get back rank checkmated. All right, so this is, wow, okay, so that's definitely funky. I can see why that is, but this gives the flavor. This gives the flavor for what happens to white and this black in this line, is that white has a lot of initiative because the active pieces, and this is when he took on e5 early. I can see why why it's better for black to maybe develop his rook and try to milk the position, because remember, he makes the choice to take on e5. All right, well, that is interesting. Okay, so I can see why black is struggling a little bit in this line, and why this actually, but this kind of, this f takes e6 line where you're giving it up for the knight is easier in some ways. But still, if black can survive this onslaught, and it feels like he can, because remember, he's choosing when the position opens up, then clearly black has some better structural advantage, better pawn structure than when there's double pawn line, and white doesn't have his light square bishop. So I think I'm gonna keep working on this and trying to, but you can see, like, Stockfish is showing me like what is going, and to some degree I'm looking at what people are playing too, but Stockfish is sort of showing me, like, okay, this is equal, but you got to play really precisely in some of these lines if you open a position up prematurely. All right, so that's Stockfish telling me stuff, and thanks so much.